Hi guys. Today's video is gonna be like a story time or a rant or a story rant, something along those lines. So as you might have noticed, the background is different from my other videos that I film in my room because I'm not in my room. I am currently in New York. Just one of my family members was in the hospital, so I came up to help out. But because of that whole ordeal that could have been easily prevented if the American healthcare system worked correctly and doctors listened to you the first time, I was reminded of a little issue that I myself had earlier on in the year. I was in the hospital for 4 days in August, and it was the stupidest 4 days of my life. First off, this story is going to be told in a series of backstories and extra information that you might not need, but you sort of need, so I'm gonna give it to you anyway. So, I was out in the woods filming. That started off bad, I promise. It was all good, clean fun, kids. I was in the woods filming a music video with some friends, which will be released at an undetermined date due to my particular proclivity for procrastination. We filmed this video. I get home, I noticed a spot on my leg. I thought nothing of it, put it out of my mind. Whatever. First backstory. When I was little, I used to get bug bites that would get infected all the time. It was really annoying. Never had acne on my face, just the rest of my body. It was great, but all I would do was put hot compresses on it, drain it. Sometimes they would give me drugs. Percocet, yeah. Miley Percocet, Percocet. To fix the infection. Done and dusted. This was not that situation. The day after filming, I went to work and, you know, I had noticed this ingrown hair, but it was starting to feel like a bruise. And I was like, whatever, it's an ingrown hair. I'm wearing tight jeans. Friction, that's a thing that happens because science. So that's what I credited my discomfort to. Tuesday, it felt like the actual fires of hell were erupting in my leg. I decided that it was probably time to go to the doctor. They slapped some generic antibiotics on me and told me that it would go away. Next day, I decided that I was still going to go to this concert that I had purchased tickets for because Rob Thomas is the love of my life. But in my mind, I thought, if you walk on it more and put more pressure on it and irritate it more, then it has no choice but to drain, right? Doctors, am I right? Good, glad we're on the same page. So we get back from the concert and my calf has now grown to the size of a good, girthy personal watermelon. I'm sporting a really trendy 100.5 degree fever. Super cute. That's when we thought it might be a reasonable idea to like test out the American healthcare system and actually use my health insurance and go to the emergency room. This proved to be a questionable choice. I went to the emergency room. They put me into, temporary ER room. After being poked and prodded for about an hour, it was now 1:30 in the morning. They told me that they wanted to keep me overnight to monitor me and that they would put me into a room immediately. Now, by immediately, they meant 4 hours after that. At 5:30 in the morning, after being there for 5 hours, they sent a nice young man in to wheel me up to my room so that I could go to sleep. And by sleep they meant have another nurse come in and ask you a series of hospital-related questions, such as, in the event that your heart stops, would you like to be resuscitated? Now at this point I was really too done to care, so I very well might have told her that no, I did not want to be resuscitated because I was too tired and at least if I was dead I would get some sleep. Meaning it's a good thing my heart didn't stop. So I finally got to sleep at 7 o'clock in the morning. Who do I hear knocking on my door at 8 o'clock in the morning? You guessed it, the hospital volunteer service. Not like I would have wanted to see a doctor or anything. That would be ridiculous. The only problem with that was that he introduced himself in such a way that made it sound like I was on death's door and he was there to help me come to terms with accepting my fate. After he said the most convoluted, specific prayer over my leg, he left, thinking I can get sleep now. Of course not. Why? Then the doctor came in. Stood there for about a minute and a half, told me I had a spider bite, and then left. So I finally got to go to sleep then. Till noon, when my entire body was on fire because it was itching. It felt like 1,000 fire ants were biting every part of my body. I felt like I had definitely gotten lice. I was on fire. So I called the nurse and she takes her sweet time getting in there. She takes about 15 minutes to actually come to me, despite the fact that I told her I couldn't feel my lips, which I feel like is kind of an emergency, but whatever. She comes in and she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I'm itchy. Am I allergic to the antibiotics?" She was like, maybe. And I was like, "Okay, can we have the doctor change them?" She was like, "Well, I gotta go call him." How about you go do that? So she leaves for another 45 minutes while I'm still itching. And she comes back, gives me Benadryl, which, by the way, when injected directly into your bloodstream makes you stupider a lot faster. And then looks at me and goes, "We're gonna change your antibiotic, but we need to give you a pregnancy test first." Why? But at this point, I'm too delirious to really question it, and I'm convinced now that by some case of immaculate conception that I've gotten pregnant. And I look at her with the most genuine concern, and I'm like, "Is being itchy a sign of being pregnant?" And at this point, she thought that I was the actual dumbest person she'd ever met in her life. Which, to be fair, is probably not too inaccurate. From that look of disgust, I can tell you both A, that I was not pregnant, and B, being itchy is not a sign of being pregnant, in case you were worried. Eventually, my mom comes to see me, and she goes outside to the nurse's station and asks to see my nurse several times, and every time, the other nurses and the other patient care techs were like, "Oh, she'll be back soon. She's on her lunch break." Now, sign me the hell up for a job that gives you a 4-hour lunch break. Am I right, ladies? Am I right? Once this lady eventually comes back, she tells my mom that there is no possible way we could know which antibiotic she is allergic to, because I was getting 2 at a time. And then she proceeded to treat my mom like my mom was the biggest idiot she'd also ever met. Like a jerk. Fast forward to the next morning, doctor comes in again and asks me why I haven't been taking my antibiotics. And I'm like, "Well, Mr. Doctor, sir, my nurse told me that there was no possible way that we could know which of the antibiotics I was allergic to, so she opted to not give me any of them." My doctor then proceeds to bang his head repeatedly against the door. After that whole confusion was settled, he tells me that he wants a surgeon to come in and see me. That's fine. He also tells me the following information. Take your oral antibiotics, but do not take them until you have eaten food. Just want to make sure all of that is clear. We have that. Food. Eat food, take antibiotics. Food, then drugs. Got it. Like life.
Percocet, yeah. Miley Percocet.
So I call the kitchen to order breakfast. And they're like, "No, you can't have anything by mouth." But so they say, "Yeah, no, you're MPO." And I was like, and they were like, "I'm sorry, we can't give you any food." Okay. And a few minutes later, a patient care tech comes in to bring me water. I start sipping this water. At this point, the surgeon comes in. "How much of that have you had?" And I'm like, "I don't know, a couple sips, I don't know what's going on, why are we yelling?" He goes, "Sips or gulps? What's the difference?" Then he calms down enough to explain to me that he wants to cut my leg open, and in order to do that, he has to put me under anesthesia, and if I'm under anesthesia and there's anything in my stomach, it might come back up through my esophagus, and I could potentially aspirate it into my lungs and die. Very comforting. So an hour later, these orderlies came in to take me down to surgery, after my mom had to remind the patient care tech, who works at the hospital, that I should probably have a hospital gown rather than the ratty shorts and hoodie that I had been wearing for the last 3 days. Greatest healthcare system in the world. So I get taken to the pre-op room without being allowed to say goodbye to my mother before this very minimally invasive surgery that I totally wasn't freaking out about at all. Every person involved in my surgery proceeded to tell me how disgusting my leg was. In their defense, it was actively oozing onto the gauze pad. But like still, my eyes are up here, boys. Surgery happens, I wake up, and at this point I remember that the surgeon had a cool accent. So I turn to the nurse next to me and I'm like, "Hey, where was the surgeon from?" And she looks at me with a straight face and goes, "Zambodia." Right. Just having come out of anesthesia, I was still a little out of it, but still 90% sure Zambodia was not a thing. So I politely tried a Zambia, to which she again said, no, he's from Zambodia. So I tried again, Zambia? At this point, she asks another nurse across the room, where's the doctor from? And this other nurse also said, Zambodia! It's either Cambodia or Zambia. Like, the two don't exist. They're not even on the same continent. I just gave up and accepted that in the hour and a half that I'd been under anesthesia, there was a new country formed called Zambodia, and my doctor was apparently from there. Side note, I had a follow-up appointment with him the next week and asked him where he was from. Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe. So I get back to my room, go to bed for the rest of the day. Later on, I have a headache, call the nurse, ask her for something, and she brings me 120-pound girl who has not really had food all day. 2 Percocets. So I had a great time for the first hour, and then for the next 4, I wanted to die. From there on out, it would have been smooth sailing, right? Had the surgery, could go home. They would just give me the antibiotics to take it home. It would all be fine, right? Wrong. Apparently, I had another infection. They didn't let me go home for another 2 days after that. Also, they refused to let me shower because they had me on isolation because of the other infection. So instead of showering, I was given a very uncomfortable sponge bath by a very uncomfortable, very young patient care tech who, in order to make herself feel more comfortable, was trying to have lighthearted conversation about my body hair. Not the time, girl. Not the time. So when they finally, on Sunday, let me go home, they sent in a nurse to do my discharge papers. And then she asked me if I had any questions. Now, I don't know why she asked me this, because she didn't have any answers when I did have several questions. So what's the point? And honestly, the best part about the whole ordeal was that one of my patient care techs happened to be the old waitress from my favorite IHOP in town. She was really confused when I was like crying tears of joy to see her in the hospital. So the biggest issue that I want you to take away from this is not that everyone was truly incompetent at their jobs. I mean, they couldn't have been, or I probably wouldn't have a leg at this point. So they did that part well. The biggest problem was that nobody talked to each other. Nobody talked to each other. Nobody wanted to put my information into the chart, and then everybody else got blamed for not putting the information into the chart, and then nobody knew what was going on because there was no information in the chart. And when someone did put information into the chart, instead of going to the top of the chart where it logically should have gone, it all went to the bottom of the chart. And then nobody wanted to take the time to scroll down to the bottom. So I had to explain to at least 10 different people who came in to see me why I was there. Which should not have been my job because I didn't get any sleep. Also, I was on a lot of drugs.
Percocet, yeah. Miley Percocet, Percocet.
They kept asking me really hard questions. Like, what is your name? I didn't know. I didn't know what my name was. So basically, if you're gonna have an emergency, I just want you all to know that you should take the time before having your life threatened to scroll through some Yelp reviews of hospitals and choose one that, you know, has at least 3.5 stars. Just for your own sanity. We may have the best healthcare system in the world, but they are the worst at, you know, menial, unimportant tasks, such as writing down what's happening to your patient. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Thank you guys for listening to my rant, and if some of you were following along on my Instagram story and just my Instagram posts in general, I didn't really give like a full explanation of what happened, so I figured it would be good to actually tell the story to everyone and tell you all of the stupid things that went on in the hospital. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to like and subscribe, and if you would like, share it with your friends, leave me a comment, preferably nice comments and constructive criticism, but if you want to send me hate mail too, that's also fine. Freedom of speech, you can do whatever you want. And I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Percocet, yeah. Miley Percocet, Percocet, yeah. Miley Percocet.